All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our next expert talk on sales. I am here with Ben Faranda today, a true global leader who has a broad experience in living in various countries around the globe. He's currently in Australia, lived in the United States, the UK, Italy, and also in Austria, where we as the PDA group are located. Ben, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Britta. Lovely to be here.
Thank you very much. And thanks for making it work at this time for you. I'm well aware of the time differences. So thank you very much. It's highly appreciated. Ben, before we get started, may I ask you to introduce yourself and give us some insights who you are, how you became the person you are today, and what you do, your background professionally, as well as your life experience.
Thank you, Britta. Yeah, hi. So obviously everyone has my name, and I would describe myself as a few things. Firstly, I'm considered one of my superpowers would be facilitation. Very good at engaging people both in a face-to-face and a live context, which makes me a trainer. And I've also done a lot of consulting work in terms of defining client needs and creating solutions and solutioneering around those. In the enablement space, doing a lot of work with partners as well as inside sales with large tech companies, and continuing to do a lot of that, particularly in the onboarding and immersion space within US tech companies, but also with a German tech company and others. I fell into this line of work as a result of some connections. And I suppose that's a small bridge to the topic here around the human side of it. I'm a connector. I love people and I love making connections with people, which has given me plenty of opportunities to be able to travel abroad, to do my work in different countries with different companies, and to be trusted to be able to deliver and create the right impact with the clients, irrespective of which part of the world I've been working in.
Great. Thanks for your introduction. And I can just confirm, I mean, your way to connecting with people is just fabulous. I mean, we know each other for more than 10 years, I think. We have a quite long of a history. And it was always a pleasure working with you, and it's always fun. So great. And thanks again for being on the show today. Ben, before we go into the key topic of how to bring your human into sales, one question I ask all my guests, since it's also one of the key topics for PDA Group Sales Enablement, how do you, Ben, based on your experience and what's happening in the field right now, define sales enablement? What's your take on that?
Oh, it's a good question. I view enablement as the combination of training, learning, support, coaching, and equipping and skilling. And I'm not sure that it's all contained under one of those particular buckets. So I would say enablement is the combination of resources that are put in place to be able to really equip a salesperson to go out and do their best work.
Okay, great. Thank you. And it's really, I don't know how many various definitions I've heard so far. So thanks for sharing your take on that and your insights. It's really highly appreciated, and we will try to keep that in mind. But to give our audience the most out of our today's topic, bring the human to sales. Can you introduce us to this broad topic? I'm sure we can't narrow it down to one or two sentences, and I'm happy about that. So can I ask you to introduce this concept to us in a little bit more detail? And I know you've prepared some slides also to accommodate us here. So I'm happy to hand over to you here to share them and give us some insights from your point of view.
Thank you so much, Britta. Yeah, look, it struck me a few years ago. I started reading a lot of self-development books and doing my own self-study around the themes of purpose and being more consciously aware and more self-aware, and other things which I'd probably denied for far too long in my life, and I'd made plenty of mistakes. One of the, I guess, the reasons why I feel that this is a topic that is worth either for some people rethinking and or to actually include as part of their repertoire is because people are dealing with people, and irrespective of whether they're a CEO of a Fortune 500 or they're a very, very junior intern in whichever company and you just happen to be working with them as part of that sales cycle and process, we're touching base with humans irrespective. And I think this is a great opportunity as we notice the leveling with COVID, that we're working from home. Many of us are working remotely. we're working transnationally more than ever, and I'm not having to get on an aeroplane. This really is an opportunity to rethink how we want to show up with our clients, and in every respect, bring a more human touch to the sale, and specifically in being able to create empathy and recognize moments which may otherwise have been missed in our hurry to get the sale and meet quota and perform on the basis of what we're being expected to do. So I have been very fortunate to work in a global program with a very large American tech company in the field of purpose. And this really struck me that it goes beyond leadership, because this is about creating a culture where we are both inclusive of the humans involved in a sales cycle. And you'll see on the screen that I'm including well and above and beyond just the customer. Of course, the customer is central to any kind of opportunity and success. And a big part of various enterprise level sales engagements are, of course, going to involve other people in that sales cycle. So I wanted to broaden and zoom out a little to broaden the context of how we can be more human, both as a leader, as a manager, as an employee, as a consultant, even within a cross-functional context in a matrix structure, how I show up and how I support my fellow human beings in a sales cycle, and that could of course be customer side as well, is part and parcel to raising our self-awareness, raising the game around how we can also introduce more empathy into our sales. And I think this is an extraordinary opportunity. And it's no surprises that the largest tech companies in the world are also embracing this philosophy wholeheartedly as they seek to humanize more of the experiences and obsess about genuine value and outcomes that are truly aligned to their customers' expectations and value. So I feel that this is a great way to differentiate and bring more conscious awareness to how we show up, to be able to really improve the experiences people have in a sale, because it's one thing to make it. And I suppose I could summarize this as two words. Often we hear the words results, and we naturally assume that that is a number, and we could hear the word success. And really the only difference between results and success at the end of a fiscal year or the end of a quarter is a result could mean we got number, but it doesn't describe the feeling. Success is a feeling that we feel and we've made the number. And I think that would be very much more aligned to bringing the more human element of ourselves to a sales cycle, including how we include our peers and colleagues in that process. And of course, our customers, and how we leave them feeling is probably far more important to future business than ever before.
Okay, great. Ben, I also heard this word empathy.
Yeah.
How do you differentiate between empathy and sympathy within the conversation? And also, as a seller, I mean, yes, I have to focus on the customer, but it's so much more than just the customer, which is included in the cycle. So how can we combine empathy versus sympathy, and also the broader scope of the universe, to call it like this, in the sales cycle?
Well, I'd like to answer you by just talking you through a couple of points, and then I'll circle back to the question if that's okay. Because I have something prepared on empathy specifically. The first thing I wanted to bring to light here, and I think this is going to map very nicely to empathy, is triggers. And what we're talking about is our human side, and triggers are literally just events that produce a feeling. If it's just an event, it's not a trigger. If it's a trigger, it's an event that produces a feeling. And I've got some examples over here. So you can imagine, someone getting married. It's a trigger. There's an event. I have a feeling of joy and wonder and hope and appreciation and adoration of the married couple. Of course, the negative is also true. A trigger, which we often associate with the word trigger, is often connected to a feeling which is negative. And one of the challenges in that is it often overtakes reasons. So we lose our human side and we become more defensive. We rely more on legal expectations and SLAs and other things, as opposed to humanizing the experience. And that's not to say that there aren't important legal structures and other things involved in a sales cycle. That's absolutely accepted. It's more that we can create a more human experience, especially where things go wrong. And part of that is noticing. Just the ability to notice when we're triggered can can really change the game. So if you notice, for example, and I've got some examples here of a customer saying to you, it's too expensive, or it's too complicated, or it's not the right fit for our business needs, or whatever it is how quickly that can convert inside us to a feeling of rejection, a feeling of frustration, a feeling of maybe superiority, a feeling that is genuinely connected to something negative. And what happens with that is thoughts, and the thoughts and the feelings start to do a circle, which we call the vicious cycle of, I have a feeling maybe my customer, I feel rejected, they don't like my solution, they're just trying to give me an excuse to knock me out of the sale. And so my thoughts then try to sense make around that feeling, will say, oh, well, this customer is ignorant, they don't understand what they need, this customer is erratic, this customer is whatever. And because those feelings generally create thoughts, which then create more feelings, it's that vicious circle. We often go into a huge series of assumptions because our brain is trying to make sense. You know, the survival part of us is like, what does this mean? Why are they not choosing us? Why are they going with their competition? Why are they trying to create blockers to what we've showed them we can do for them? And we've got references, and we've got all these other wonderful ways of exploring and explaining how we can build on their success. Unfortunately, the client isn't hearing that. And by sharing something of a more rejection-based nature, we can internalize that and then catastrophize. And that catastrophization then leads to these thoughts and feelings, which of course precludes us from empathy. Because once we are triggered, once we're in a fight or flight state, we're talking about the negative state now, it's very difficult to then move around to the perspective of our customer, because we have made assumptions about their values, or assumptions about their attitude, or an assumption about their motivations. We build that story to make ourselves feel comfortable. And this is all happening under the surface. We're not in control of this. This is our unconscious kind of responses. So, and as a result,
how can we actually change or pivot these negative thoughts and create for ourselves the self-awareness to change this into a positive again, and be empathetic in the whole discussion? I think that's one of the most challenging things we have to be aware of.
I fully agree with you. And I think, you know, one of the greatest gifts in terms of human enlightenment, if you like to call it, is that there is research. There's now literature which supports the notion that our egos don't have to run our behavior. If we are more consciously aware, we can accept moments where we are being driven by impulses rather than by choice. So I've got the words agency and choice here. And Viktor Frankl's seminal work explored the space between stimuli and response. So in answer to your question, when we are triggered, when the client does once again reject us, or once again creates a new blocker that we feel is a hurdle we can't jump, another reason why they're not wanting to buy from us, or whatever is the narrative that we've got running in our head, is literally exploring that space between what we heard and how we want to respond. Means maybe we have to slow things down. So you could just hit the pause button and go, okay, let us think about how we can come back to you with a suitable alternative. Or maybe I need to go back to the team and we need to rearrange this so that we can be closer to what it is that you need. Now, of course, that requires enough self-awareness to say that my behaviors, my mannerisms, the word I use will have an impact proportionally on the customer. And of course, all of us know about a filter and putting our best foot forward, and, you know, not swearing at the client and not doing things which would be aggressive or combative with them.
Yes.
And yet we go back to the workplace, and sometimes where we've missed something, the deal has dropped, it hasn't worked out, we then go to a place of blame. And so we start to make assumptions about our team. We start to kick the pre-sales consultant, or maybe we blame the product itself and say, you know, the engineering department just haven't done their job, or the marketing team should have qualified this customer better, and so on and so on and so on. So this link between how we can kind of interrupt our impulses, it's all around pressing pause. It's all around putting space between stimuli and response. And we know that because we're having a feeling. I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling tense. And if we can catch ourselves with that feeling, generally we can create space. And one of the easiest shortcuts is just to, if we can name it, we can tame it. If we can say our emotional state, we can generally put space between what we feel and how we will then choose to respond. And then the self-awareness link really comes back to this notion of how I show up in every encounter, whether it's digital like now, or whether it's face-to-face, or whether it's with my team back in an office, will have a proportional impact on how they feel. Hence, bringing our human to the sales should be broader than just with our customers. Yes. Noticing that we're going to impact our customers, our colleagues, our partners, even our suppliers, and all of these small moments aggregate to an impression people have, whether they feel psychologically safe around us, whether they feel supported by us, whether they feel aligned with our values. And noticing that it's not about faking who you are, but it's about taming your impulses, taming that negative energy that might leak out of you in a moment when you're triggered, could bring enormous benefits to how people feel, which is that success quotient. We could get the sale, but if people feel like they've been run over by a car, they're not going to necessarily want to come to work tomorrow. If we feel, on the other hand, we've brought the best solution to our customer, we've helped them see opportunities, we've sold them a really good product that is really helpful for them, then of course we can roll that tape back in our own mind and say, yeah, we've done really good work today. It wasn't just about getting the number, it's about everyone winning. Yeah. And I think the final shortcut here, Britta, is if you could notice yourself when things go wrong. So like if we got some bad news and it's, from the client side or internally, something's broken. If we had a video camera and we could see ourselves and how we respond in that moment, we would probably want to change some of our unconscious behaviors and reactions to stimuli.
Ben, thanks for that. I heard two things here. That one, we should be authentic and don't fake our feelings to stay this human person. I think that's really great, and especially in the remote world today, one of the key things from my point of view. And you also mentioned noticing this trigger. Can you give our audience some tips and tricks on how we can actually hit the pause or the break button when we do feel this angst and anxiety and negative feelings coming up inside, so we can actually turn it around into something positive and keeping this safe space within the team, in the sales conversation, or wherever? Do you have any tips and tricks you are happy to share with us here?
Absolutely. So in a combined sales setting, I would say there should probably be some contracting done between all stakeholders on the sales side, not the customer side, obviously, but where we maybe have a safe word, where if I hear something that I know I'm going to get burred up about because I've already argued before with the client, or I felt like the client didn't get it, is have someone else try and explain it to the client. And we've agreed to that already. It could be alternatively that I limit myself to the first 15 minutes of our meeting, because I know then the heat is going to turn up on a topic that I can't necessarily feel so calm about. So I might hand off and be very deliberate and contrive the timing and my contribution to, again, match what I know will probably get in front and drive my impulses. One of the classic ways of self-awareness and self-management, self-regulation emotionally, is to keep a trigger diary. If you wrote down for a week the major things, the kind of moments where you felt anxious or frustrated or cross with another person, you'd probably notice patterns, and those patterns can be very helpful to generate insights around things that we can know will possibly tip us over. It doesn't mean we're not going to feel upset or frustrated because I can identify it. It's about being able to consciously going, we're about to get into the nitty-gritty of the negotiation. They're going to force our price down. That's not where I play well. I play really well in positioning value. I need to hand off to my peer, Britta, who's going to work on the pricing, because I know I'm not going to feel as empowered, or maybe I'm going to take it personally. So I hope that gives you an illustration of where we can raise our game by consciously raising our awareness to the things that may, for want of a better word, tip the boat over that we're sitting in.
I really love those two tips. With one, on the one hand, the safe word, I think that's great. It's an easy to implement thing. If we are aware of it and aligned within the team, I think that's a super smart tool to use. And also the journaling, or as you called it, the diary of trigger events. So you actually do get more aware of it yourself, because sometimes you don't even know what's actually triggering you. But by reflecting, self-awareness comes into place. And wonderful, great.
There's actually a mnemonic, Britta, which was taught by an American professor who does a lot of work in bias. And she calls it the detect, reflect, reject. And the notion is we catch ourselves with a thought that is not purposeful or supportive of who we are and how we want to show up. We reflect on, why is that making me feel this way, or what bias or what belief am I tapping into that doesn't help me? And the rejection is then a necessity. That's the choice, where I go, I refuse to believe or go with that feeling or that thought. And this creates new synaptic connections. We can actually rewire our responses to that stimuli in the future. And neuroscience indicates that we have that neuroplasticity where we can actually move past a lot of what I would call the grooves. Think about Rome and the chariots, and they always go into that groove because the wheels were going across them for hundreds of years. We have the same thing happening in our brain, and we can create new connections which actually accelerate us past those moments where we would otherwise get stuck emotionally.
Cool, great. I have to look that up myself too. Ben, one question which was really burning under my nails, and I'm aware that we only have a couple of minutes left. How everything heard so far, how can we transfer that into the virtual world and the remote settings we are in right now, and taking the signs from outside? It's not going to change within the next couple of days or weeks. It's something we have to deal with. So how can we actually bring us as a human more into this technical, virtual, maybe even perceived as cold world, and make it more feeling more natural and empathetic and all those things we just talked about?
That's a wonderful question. And, you know, I think I reflect on since March, I've been locked down in terms of no travel because I used to travel abroad pretty much every week. And what I've noticed is the more people are online, which is most of us, the more accommodating we are of children running in and needing something, or a dog barking, or a person saying, oh, sorry, just give me a moment, I've just got to feed the baby, or whatever is going on in their life. And I think not to hide away from that. We don't need to construct a corporate identity from our home office. I think we also need to bring in some of our home life so that people observe our humanity in that moment. And it's not to share everything, and it's not to show people me cleaning the house like that it's not to take it to an exaggerated perspective. However, I have a puppy, you have a dog. When the dog is barking, I'm not bothered. Like, I don't let it trigger me or rattle me that there might be an interruption or a commotion between my teenage children outside my home office. I will, of course, you know, maybe turn the mic off and the camera off and say, hey, stop. But it's not to feel like I have to excuse every imperfection that is happening in my environment. I think it's actually to embrace that, which makes other people feel safer. They could bring their world into the meetings, into the dialogue, into the relationship that we're cultivating.
Great. Do you see any kind of boundaries, or how could we personally get, again, self-aware of our boundaries? Like, you gave some examples which events don't trigger you because you're just like, well, that's the way it is. That's my life. That's my surrounding. I can't change it. Can you give some tips on how to create those boundaries for yourself to accept the things which are happening?
Well, it's a really great question. And all of the psychology literature that I've read indicates pretty much the same thing. Well, it coalesces back to the same theme. It is what it is. And that doesn't mean that, you know, it doesn't upset me, but I also have to accept the things that I can control is pretty much myself and my emotions, or at least my responses. I can't necessarily control my emotions. On the other hand, I think it was maybe Viktor Frankl or someone who said, you know, if you can't change something around you, look at changing yourself, or something to that effect. And I think this puts the emphasis back on agency and choice. It's up to us. We can choose how we respond to things. Of course, if a bear is running at me full pace with its fangs showing and it's, you know, drooling and it's roaring at me and it's going to eat me, well, of course, you know, take the cue from my brain, stay alive, run or fight or whatever, you know, that fight flight thing. But if we're talking about social threat, some of the things that we perceive as being a threat, our brain can't easily distinguish. I think it's also just to sit with a little bit of that discomfort and just notice yourself. So I'm answering in two parts here. One is kind of, it is what it is. And another one might be just roll the tape back, do a little reflection, like going, oh yeah, that happened today. I want it. You know, how did I respond to that? How would I like to respond to that? What would be a purposeful way to respond to that if that happened in future? And again, that power of reflection and then maybe visualization of like seeing myself in the same position again, showing up more purposefully and ideally more resourcefully. I wanted to just quickly slip this in before the end. So empathy, there's three things around empathy, but the one that I really think is beneficial is perspective empathy or cognitive empathy. And it's that ability to literally think about where you're sitting, Britta, and try and take it from your point of view. And prior to this meeting, I actually was wondering, like, what questions could I share with you prior that would make it easier for us to talk? And it's not saying we're constructing this thing to make it all fake. It's more to generate questions which make sense, and then you can tailor and change and add to, and that's fine. But to give a little bit more empathy around this is to try and get in the chair of the other person. There is a suggestion with cognitive empathy, we don't have feeling. I would say cognitive empathy plus feelings. Like, I think it's important that we know that some people who with COVID are still minding or tending to an ailing parent or have other things going on in their life. It's not just to imagine how difficult it would be to care for an aging parent and there's a lack of resources. It's also important that we show them care and appreciation for their situation. So I think this all leads back to curiosity, and I'm going to finish it on this and say, oh, here it is. This was the quote, when we're no longer to change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. Here are the tips and tricks I would say. Acknowledge your triggers, press pause, create space, consider the choices before we leap into action. Hold a mirror up to yourself, metaphorically. How are you impacting others? Check yourself for self-awareness. And if you really are being self-aware, maybe ask a couple of people around you, like, how do I show up when we get bad news? Give it to me straight. And if you genuinely sought to understand the perspectives of others and your customer, what would you see that they see? Really focusing and honing in on that, I think, brings our human to the sale, because we move past the notion of trying to shoehorn in an opportunity where maybe there isn't one, and we can actually go to that.
Thank you so much, Ben. I think that was a great summary of everything we spoke about, and also the tips. Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Ben. Before we let everyone go off to the day, one or two last questions, Ben. From your personal side, you mentioned some books or people who influenced you already throughout our talk now, but is there anything specific that comes into your mind? You say that's really something that influenced my development and my experiences in life, or a podcast, something like that, what you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think Viktor Frankl's work is a meat minimum. It's just such a brilliant way to engage in psychiatry and the early foundations of purpose. And of course, his work is seminal. I think it was probably about 10 years ago, I got involved in doing some feedback work. And in that feedback, let's say learning about how to teach others to give feedback, the word curiosity kept popping up. And I think this has really supported me, because whenever I'm feeling judgmental of another person, whenever I'm feeling kind of got out or frustrated or whatever, like if I'm triggered or I'm just not in a great way, when I lean into curiosity, when I use that as my guidepost, my crutch, the thing that I lean on, it suspends judgment. It opens me up to other people and the way of seeing things from their perspective. And really, ideally, as a superpower, I don't think it could be underestimated. Curiosity is a wonderful way to bring our human into nearly every interaction, because instead of me making a micro judgment about a mannerism or a word you chose to use, I instead ask myself a question. I wonder what happened for them that they had to say that, or I'm wondering what's going on for you. And I can then ultimately become a more empathetic person and bring my human into that relationship.
Great, super, thanks. I think I can only agree. Always be curious. We heard that throughout many talks already, and it's such a key thing. Stay curious, show that you actually want to engage, and then it's going to work really good. Super. Ben, how can our audience get in touch with you if they want to exchange anything further with you? What's the best way to contact?
Yeah, look, my name at gmail.com. It's a pretty simple email, benfaranda@gmail.com. You can look me up on LinkedIn, and maybe after this, if anyone hits you up, Britta, you're very welcome to share my details. Even with GDPR rules, I am giving my consent willingly and freely here on video.
Thank you. Great. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for your time and sharing your insights with us. And thanks everything. Have a wonderful day or evening for you now already. and speak to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Bye.